Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us for today's panel discussion and our first learning session of the season, Intro to Identity, Disability, and Inclusion in the Arts. My name is Courtney Cintron, Ingenuity's Director of Partnerships and Learning, and I am also joined here today by my incredible colleague, Ingenuity's Manager of Partnerships and Learning, Ariel Frost. Ariel has taken the lead on shepherding the Constellation program this year, and you will hear more from them about the work throughout today's session. And we're both also donning some neck attire today, and we didn't even plan on it, but now you know we're a team. I'd also like to welcome our wonderful new Partnerships and Learning consultant, Maya Odim, who will also be providing program thought partnership today and really throughout the programmatic year. We're also joined here today by Ingenuity's 2022 to 2023 Constellation residents, Asia Calcano, Cleo Goldberg, Bradley Lathan, Emily Leonard, and Robbie Williams. Everyone's gonna pop on for a second, give us a little hello. Thank you. So this dynamic group of arts education leaders representing both arts organizations and CPS schools will be working together and with Ingenuity over the next several months to develop new and innovative learning institutes that are really elevating key areas of their expertise, of their research and experience to you all. So really creating that constellation of learning and knowledge sharing. So definitely be on the lookout for more to come from this cohort. Really, once again, though, thank you to all of the residents for this thoughtful work and collaboration. And thank you to all of you for being part of this dialogue and learning journey with us. Today's introductory conversation and the conversations throughout this year will center on the intersection of identity, disability, and inclusion in arts education. Arts organizations have elevated these topics to Ingenuity in an annual survey as high priority learning areas for the year. So Ingenuity also knows that these topics play a crucial role in creating arts environments where students can fully express themselves and where their unique experiences are honored. And also these practices and approaches to these topics are evolving very quickly. So we're hoping to really come together to build consensus on current and effective practices from the folks that are centering this work in schools and in arts classrooms. So in today's panel discussion, moderated by Ariel Frost and myself, the Constellation residents will introduce themselves and briefly discuss how they will address these affirmative and adaptive models of teaching and learning in their upcoming learning institutes. And we'll also elevate several critical questions on the topics of identity, disability, and inclusion that the Constellation residents have crafted for one another. And then at the close of these questions, we hope that you will also join us in the conversation by elevating some of your own questions that you have around these topics and their impact in arts classrooms. So we welcome you to submit your questions throughout using the Q&A feature, but you'll also have time later on after the panel discussion to submit those questions as well. With that, I will pass things off to Ariel to share a few more items before we get started.
We would like to acknowledge that today's virtual program is taking place on the stolen land of the Council of Three Fires, the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Odawa nations. Because of the Great Lakes, the land naturally became a site of travel, healing, trade, and gathering for many native tribes, and it's still home to over 100,000 tribal members in the state of Illinois that still practice their traditions and care for the land. As we begin today's program, let's honor these ancestral grounds and support the resilience and strength that all Indigenous people have shown worldwide, and begin to rethink our own relationship with the land and its original people. Now I will hand it off to Maya for housekeeping and agenda.
Good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to highlight some points and reiterate some of what's been stated. So there'll be closed captions that are available for anyone's use today. Recording will also be available in a couple weeks. So if you want to revisit that or share that with someone. Again, we want to remind you that you can submit questions via the Q&A feature, and we encourage you to think about questions and to submit those. Polls are going to appear on your screen twice throughout today's panel. And so we encourage you to participate in those, and I'll share the results with everyone. And then we wanted to remind you to complete an exit survey that will come up at the very end. On the agenda today, as a reminder, we're going to give you a background about Constellation, the program genesis, how it started. We'll have some really rich panelist introductions, and then a really, really nice panel discussion with a Q&A. So it'll be engaging, which I want to remind you once again to please submit questions if you have those. And then we'll close with some announcements. And this is our first poll. I'll pass it to Ariel.
Yeah, so we've done a good amount of talking, and we want to hear from you in this anonymous poll, get a sense of where everyone is coming from. So what we'd like to know is, how familiar are you with the terms identity, inclusion, and disability culture, and how it relates to the arts and your role? We're just going to give everyone a chance to answer the poll. I think we're about good. So I'm going to end the poll and share the results with you all. Alrighty, so it looks like not too many people are like, hey, I don't know anything about this, and that is why I'm here, duh. But also there's a good number of people sort of in the middle. A lot of people seem to have a lot more familiarity with identity and inclusion than they do with disability culture, and that is not surprising to us. It's one of the reasons why we're elevating this today and throughout the year and in times to come.
Okay, thank you, Ariel and Maya. So a little bit more about Constellation's beginnings. So Ingenuity has been presenting Learning Institute since its inception in 2011. And our facilitators and topics have varied pretty widely over the years, and we've had quite a bit of content breadth. However, content from one learning session to another didn't necessarily have an explicit content through line, nor were our presenting institutions or individual facilitators necessarily collaborating with one another. And so Constellation's Teaching and Learning Development Program, which launched at the outset of the 2021 school year, was started to change all of that. So we're still delivering learning institutes, but the content and the facilitators are much more connected, and we're able to really explore topics more deeply throughout the year. So in addition to the resulting learning institutes, the 9-month program is designed to support a community of arts education leaders in collaborating to design innovative learning programs around specific high-need learning areas to other arts partners as a means of collectively strengthening and really advancing equity-centered and quality school arts programs for students. So the residents in this program are supported through peer and one-on-one collaboration, access to Ingenuity's tools, data, and research, marketing and communication supports, stipends for the development and delivery of their learning sessions, and assistance with workshop design, delivery, and evaluation. And then on the next slide here, drawing on Ingenuity's commitment to equity, the program structure aims to decentralize expertise, and adult learning opportunities by expanding knowledge, teaching, and creating a facilitator network that elevates the arts partner voice. Also prioritizing knowledge sharing and cultivating a partner-to-partner learning network that can collectively and horizontally contribute to the growth and learning of arts education partners. And then building a growing open source knowledge base around new, innovative, and accessible ways of learning. So especially in the virtual learning space, what does that look like? What can we expect from that, and how can we innovate around ways to do that? So that's a little bit about Constellation. Now that you know about the program, I'm going to pass things back to Ariel to introduce the Constellation residents.
Yay, this is Ariel speaking. So I am very excited to introduce our residents to you all. I'll start off by telling you a bit about each resident, and then I'll ask them to elaborate on the things that I say with some more specific questions. I like to go in alphabetical order by last name, so we'll start with Asia. Asia Calcagno has a lot of tattoos, a bike that she loves, and tea that she's probably brewing. She's an educator who leads with authenticity, a sense of humor, and a love for all things creatively possible. She fell in love with writing in her English class her first year of high school, and it hasn't left her life. She's a former classroom teacher and teaching artist who now serves as an arts partner nonprofit leader, currently the director of programs at Young Chicago Authors. She was raised in the poetry performance space as a youth and has competed and performed locally, nationally, and abroad, and has developed youth poetry education programming in both Chicago and Connecticut. So, Asia, give us a wave.
Hi, everyone.
So Asia, what I'd like to know right now is, why did you apply for this residency? And can you tell us a little bit about how your work connects to the areas of inclusion, identity, or disability culture? So just pick one for me.
Yeah, for sure. I think it was really important for me to be able to just have community with other arts educators and folks who are doing similar work in this city, and a little bit just about how my work connects to those topics. I've always been a writer, always been an educator, and I've worked predominantly with BIPOC communities, neurodivergent learners. So I just inherently value teaching in ways that value a multitude of identities and needs. And I focus on using writing and literacy as a tool for cross-cultural communication. So in my work, I design and teach others to design literacy and writing cultures that validate unique mechanisms and needs and creativity as a tool to get towards literacy. So.
All right, thank you so much for that, Asia. Let's hear from Cleo next. Cleo Goldberg is regularly involved as a music educator, conductor, and percussionist. In addition to teaching K-8 music at Alexander Graham Bell School, Cleo is the artistic director of the Lakeside Pride Pops Ensemble and the founder and director of the Millennial Chamber Players. Their passions include wellness, mental health awareness, LGBTQ+ equality, and the POC community, and also dogs. They perform as a drag queen under the name Manic Maxi, so please Google that, find out wherever you can see them perform. And another little tidbit I found while doing some internet sleuthing, Cleo has been a teaching assistant with the Percussion Scholarship Group, a program of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra's Negani Music Institute. And they were a proud member of this program for 9 years. I actually encountered Cleo at the Arts Ed conference last year, and I was so sad that I didn't get to see their session that I insisted we ask them to apply for this residency. So, Cleo, pop on there, and can you tell us why you said yes to my constant bugging you, and tell us a little bit about what you bring to the residency.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. The first reason I was interested in the residency was thinking that Ariel was so cool when we met at the CPS conference. And I was like, anything that they are very insistently suggesting to me has to be really, really cool and really important. And it was correct. This is a really, really cool program, and I'm really happy to be a part of it. I think the focuses of this year's cohort are just so important. I mean, there are so many wonderful teaching artists working all around the city, so many wonderful arts partners, but a really important focus is what we're doing truly reaching every single student? And are we able to adapt and accommodate to make our instruction work for all students? So yeah, I'm so glad to be a part of this cohort, learning from my other cohort members, just from the little bit that I've heard so far of what they're working on. My learning session that I'm developing further is particularly based on gender inclusion and kind of unpacking ways that the gender binary is just so embedded everywhere, but particularly in education and in arts education. So I will take a look at things like concert attire for music ensembles and also for dance ensembles, simple things like language that we use every day, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, things like that that we can debunk and find new ways to word and use that are most inclusive. So yeah, looking forward to doing more work and learning more from my colleagues.
Cleo, you were just always vibing with me. I love it. I'm so excited to see what you do with your content. Now we're going to hear from Emily. Emily Leonard is the founder, executive director, and lead teaching artist of Idea Box Integrated Arts. She brings ambitious, academically integrated residencies to Chicago Public Schools that result in unique audience-artist interactions that are grounded in improvisation, modern dance theory, and maker processes. Emily also writes, directs, and choreographs professionally. Her most successful and long-running Black Box theater productions combine sketch comedy, music, choreography, and costuming to dismantle the patriarchy while having a rollicking good time. All right, Emily, what made you decide to apply for this residency twice in the same cycle, I might add? And how does your focus on practical tools create space for identity, inclusion, or disability culture?
I did not know I applied twice. That's lovely. I was just thinking as you were talking to some of the other artists, I've been kind of if Ingenuity was a band, I'm the girl that follows the band. I've been learning from Ingenuity for a really long time, and it's deeply affected my practice. What I do in the classroom as an interdisciplinary artist is try to create a space where students have the tools to create whatever it is their voice is telling them to create. And so that is an inherently inclusive way to work. And I also have a very deep and long-running focus on artists as a community, a function of community, and of course, for creating community. And you can't have community without inclusion. So for me, that's really where I started from. Anything that I have learned to add over the years, my work with students with disabilities, my work on expanding trauma and awareness and accessibility has been largely influenced by Ingenuity and the tools Ingenuity has put out and the foundation Ingenuity has given us as teaching artists to build on. So I'm really excited to circle around and bring some of that knowledge back to the community, along with other really practical tools like cardboard knives and things that kindergartners can use to glue.
I love it. So many great things there. And I also love that you're kicking off the residencies with what promises to be a fun and interactive practical institute. We love practicality. All right, time to hear from my girl, Bradley. Bradley Lathan is an educator, performer, choreographer, and lifelong learner. She believes in considering the influence and impact that poverty, community violence, and socioeconomic status have on student learning, engagement, and behavior. Bradley currently serves as the program manager at Forward Momentum Chicago. In that role, she helps manage and develop all dance education programs, curriculums, and professional developments. Bradley is also a member of the NAWA Dance Corps, and her work with both companies has afforded her the opportunity to perform and choreograph for the inaugural cohort of the Chicago Black Dance Legacy Project. Now, here is another wonderful tidbit about Bradley. Bradley currently holds a Bachelor of Arts in Computer Studies, a Master of Applied Computer Science, and is a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. Bradley's ideas first came across my desk when she applied to teach a session at the Arts Ed conference. I knew that she had way too much gold to try to fit into only 50 minutes. And I'm so glad that she followed up when I told her to look out for other opportunities. So Bradley, what interests you about the work you're sharing? And how does your unique perspective align with identity, inclusion, or disability culture?
Thanks, Ariel, for the awesome introduction first. I think what really makes me love this work is that my particular focus is always on the children and how they respond. James Baldwin tells us that children have never been good at listening to their elders, but they have never failed to imitate us. And I think my perspective, coming from the teaching artist perspective and asking the questions, do we allow our teaching artists to stand in their full identity, whatever that might mean for them? We have to mirror the actions that we want our children to do and be people that we want them to be. So I think my perspective of that, coming from the teaching artist space, as well as this kind of intersectionality between being Black, person of color, but also having issues of identity, having socioeconomic issues that all kind of run into one another and present barriers for them actually growing into the full humans that we would like for them to be.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for that insight, Bradley. I'm really glad you're part of this cohort because we definitely got to show some love to our TAs out there. Okay, last but certainly not least, let's hear from Robbie. Robbie Lee Williams is a Black Latina disabled dancer and spoken word artist in Chicago. He pursues works that lift up and promote artists in the disability communities and communities of color, and searches for ways to help people of all body types and abilities to dance. He's looking to join his poetry and adaptive dance in a way that is meaningful and moving. Robbie is the lead instructor of Reinventability's disability dance program and post-high school transitional program for students with disabilities. He's a member of Momenta Dance Company and Tango 21 Dance Theater, and a 2021 Bodies of Work Fellow. I have seen some of Robbie's work on his 3 Arts profile. Shout out to Bodies of Work and the team over at 3 Arts. And it is absolutely stunning. And Robbie, you came to this residency a little differently than the others. Can you tell me how you got here and what you're hoping to highlight regarding identity, inclusion, or disability culture?
Yeah, absolutely. So I came to the Constellation Cohort by way of my mentor, LaDonna Friedhelm Javid, who runs Reinventability. She was the founder. And when she tuned me into this, we saw it as a great opportunity to plug in more with the larger teaching artist community here in Chicago. Because I'm still relatively new to being a teaching artist and trying to figure out how to navigate these kind of unknown waters. So I'm really excited to be a part of this cohort because a lot of the work that I do with Reinventability is focusing on how to give students the tools with which to move, the permission to explore their bodies and their movements, and we're working on trying to figure out a way to convey the experience as well as the language and help people uncover their blind spots as educators when it comes to dancing with and teaching dance to students of all types of disabilities, whether that's cognitive, physical, visible, invisible. We want to cover the whole spectrum.
Robbie, you're so wonderful. I absolutely love the way you talk about your work. Okay, so before we hear even more from Robbie, we have another fun little poll for you because, you know, we're not just all serious over here at Ingenuity. So I'm launching the poll right now. We asked each of our residents what their dream job was when they were a child. So I want to know what you all think. Which of these professional areas was the most common among our residents? I'm watching it go. It's very interesting to see how it moves around. Oh, our options are actor, marine biologist, firefighter, dancer, or librarian. Okay, and it looks like we're about there. All right. I'm going to end the poll now. So,
Looks
I'm sorry
like, yeah.
yeah, it looks like you all feel that dancer is the most common one, which makes sense. I'm sorry to tell you it was not dancer, but we do have at least 4 dancers in this cohort. Asia, are you do you dance?
In my kitchen, but that's about it.
So not really. Well, can you tell us what you wanted to be when you were younger, and that might give us a little hint as to what the correct answer is.
Yeah, I really wanted to be a marine biologist, but I think it's funny because I never knew what it really meant. It just kind of sounded cool. So
So you wanted to be a marine biologist, and surprisingly, you're not the only one in the cohort who wanted to be a marine biologist. Who else wanted to be a marine biologist? Yes, it was Robbie. So we discovered that out of only 5 people, 2 of them wanted to be marine biologists. Okay, so Cleo, can you tell us what your dream job was when you were a child?
So I think when I was asked the question, I would always say architect. I think that just became my answer to the question when I had to say it at school, but I really wanted to be an actor. And I still, I fuse it into parts of my life when I can, my acting soul, but.
Excellent. Bradley, how about you?
I went to college thinking I was going to be a physical therapist. And after my first biology class didn't go so well, I decided it was time to choose something else.
Okay, and how about you, Emily?
Hi, this is Emily. I wanted to be a teacher or an actor.
Wow, and it turns out that you're both. Absolutely.
Not so bad.
Thank you so much, you all. I really appreciate it. Okay, so now that we know some fun things about our panelists, we'll get into the nitty gritty. So thank you very much for those slides. Appreciate it. What you all have been waiting for, our panel discussion. So each of our residents came up with an essential question for this discussion. And what we'll do is we're going to ask them to answer their own question, and then also speak on some of the other questions that were developed by their colleagues. So Robbie, since you were last before, now you get to be first. So Robbie, what does inclusion look like in your art form? And how do you make this with and for people with disabilities?
Yeah, this is Robbie. Thank you for the question, Ariel. One of the focuses, and this is probably just because this is probably rooted in the fact that I come from a big family. I'm the oldest of 7 kids, is always wanting to include everyone. And so with disability culture, disability dance, inclusive dance, what that looks like is constantly changing. The landscape, it all depends on who comes to the event. But at the same time, I wanted to challenge that with how do we just make inclusivity the norm for it. And so what it looks like, at least in my art, is including people of multiple disabilities and multiple disciplines in the pieces that I put together. So at least in my work with 3Arts, we included, I have a couple of friends who are blind sound artists. We work with them. We have one of my mentors is a deaf dancer, and it's incredible just to be able to work with the breadth of people of different disabilities and different disciplines. So at least what inclusion looks like in my art form is not just trying to make art for people of all disabilities, but with people of all disabilities, all body types. And so that's I think really important.
That is wonderful. Bradley, I know that Robbie was talking about just starting being a teaching artist, and I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what some of the things that Robbie just said, how those resonate with you as someone managing teaching artists, and what that looks like in your work.
This is Bradley. I do think that all of those things that Robbie mentioned are very important, but even down to the functionality of the things we use in dance. So if we think about Marley, there was one summer that my company, we had a student that was in a wheelchair, and you can't, sometimes it'll stick to the wheel. So having something in place for those students. Normally ballet bars sit up a little higher. If you're gonna have someone and actually include them, maybe they should be adjustable. And we also find that not just in dance, but there are also places around the city. We took our kids on field trips, and there were certain places I had teaching artists physically picking her chair up to get her into certain places. So I think all around, not just in the art form, but across the community in general, we have to be more mindful of making sure that everything is accessible for everyone.
Love that. Okay, Cleo, what are parts of your arts practice that make disability and inclusion difficult to reach? And how can you change this?
Yeah, I can speak to inclusion first. I talked a little bit about specifically what my work is geared towards about gender inclusion. Yeah, there are so many parts of the discipline where it just seems to be so defined and divided based on gender. Something like if it's a band or a choir and orchestra, it's typical to say, okay, the boys will wear the tuxedo and the girls will wear this uniform dress. Yeah, it's just, I mean, beyond time to unpack that by, I mean, not even just, I don't even think it's necessary to change the entire, just even the language, saying something like option 1 or option 2, allowing the student to pick which one fits best for them, or switching to something just like all black, formal black. Yeah, gender, it just has such a inevitable way of being so tied to attire, yeah, and gender being so connected. So I think, yeah, it's just really, it's best to figure out a way to word protocols in a way that is most inclusive and also gives students the most choice. And yeah, gender inclusion, as far as racial and ethnic inclusion, I think it has so much to do with just how to me it feels just very, very systemic, where for example, people notice how lots of the top performing orchestras are made up by primarily white musicians, and we want to see more diversity orchestras. Well, that means figuring out opportunities for more young musicians of various backgrounds to get high quality education. So I think, I mean, all throughout the city, there are such great programs like the Merit School of Music Tuition Free Conservatory is fantastic. Chicago Musical Pathways Initiative, fantastic. I'm really happy to see that work being done. And as far as disability, I'm learning so much more every day at my school. I'm getting a lot of experience working with our deaf and hard of hearing department, and just learning not only the most meaningful ways for deaf students to interact with music, but also understanding how to change instruction to really help things click for them. I think for all music teachers, arts teachers, working with interpreters, working with classroom assistants who really understand the learning approaches that work for them is important. And I think as Bradley put so well, just being committed to making everything as accessible as possible. So if that means a student who wants to play flute but perhaps doesn't have full use of one arm, then okay, we'll figure out something to use to hold it up. Or yeah, so many different scenarios and options, but just being completely committed to figuring out something that will work for that student.
Absolutely. So I love this question that asks specifically about your own arts practice. And Emily, since you're kind of an everyman, I would love for you to talk about what makes disability and inclusion difficult in basically literally everything. But, just pick one or two or four. I don't know. Go for it.
I mean, every person. What was say the end of that again? Sorry.
So what are the parts of various arts practices that you do that make disability and inclusion difficult to reach?
This is funny. This is not the whole answer, but I was just thinking about how much just simple inclusion of different body types is still a challenge in dance. Like beyond all the other challenges to inclusion, just, I have students who I'll say, well, have you taken dance? You're a great mover. Oh, I couldn't take dance. Like dance is outside their conception of what could belong to a person, of their shape or size, or many, many other reasons a student might not perceive themselves as a dancer. So I think the first challenge we all face to inclusion is the student's own perception of themselves as not able, because someone somewhere, often not themselves, told them that they are not able to do a piece of what we're trying to do, and that block is just standing in their way. For me, a lot of my learning has been reactionary. I've been teaching since I was 14 or 15, which was in the late 90s, mid 90s, I guess. And, when I was in high school, we were still doing blatantly offensive things on stage in the name of, oh, that's how it was when they wrote the play, what have you. And I remember in high school being offended by anything goes, depictions of Asians in anything goes, and being like, how are we putting this on stage right now? How are we still this insensitive? But every time something like that happens, I have a little, pocket in my educator brain that goes, okay, not that. That's not something that's going to make students comfortable. That's not something that's going to make students feel good. And it taught me, or I fortunately made the right choices to go down the path of just asking students what they need to participate in an activity. Oh, you can't do this? Okay. What can we do? Right? I worked with a parent, can't draw. I can't draw. Well, of course, you don't have to be an outstanding artist. Can you draw Pac-Man? I can draw Pac-Man. Okay, you can draw. Let's do a Pac-Man cartoon strip, right? To express what it is the parent was feeling. So really over the years, students have taught me what they need to feel included, and it's caused me to broaden my bag of tricks that I walk in the door with, so that I already know I need to make sure there's enough clear space for somebody in a wheelchair to get around everything that's going to be in the room, even if there's hot glue guns out and the cords are everywhere, right? I bring tape to tape my cords down now, so that I know nobody's going to unexpectedly trip or get hooked on a cord. And so it's these little practical details that have to become embedded in your practice, which is challenging. You can't just be like, okay, I tried that and it didn't work. You have to try it and try it. And then when it finally does work, you have to keep reminding yourself to do it the rest of your practice. There are things I've learned that are good habits that I still have to sit down and go, okay, you said guys like 18 times today, Emily, and we're not saying guys anymore. So let's just remind ourselves what it is we're going to say instead. We're going to call them artists. We're going to call them dancers. We're going to call them authors, but I'm not going to say guys till I do again. But it's those little everyday reminders, and like Cleo was saying, it's language. It's it's knowing what comes out of my mouth is going to be taken very seriously by this young person, and they may make a value judgment about themselves just based on me saying that's correct or that's incorrect. So how I make that statement is super important, how I phrase it. And it's a battle I think artists face, convincing the rest of the world that small word changes are important.
That's a really, yeah, that's this is Ariel, Emily, all those things. See, I knew you were the one to incorporate like literally every
all the art
especially in the theater space. Yeah. Courtney, I'll hand it off to you.
Yeah, these are some amazing reflections. We're going to actually pull on this thread a little bit more. So yes, this is Courtney speaking. Our next question though is for Asia. Hi, Asia. What factors do you think contribute to inaccessibility in arts education and also within arts disciplines for ourselves and for others? So this is more broadly.
Yeah, thanks, Courtney. This is Asia speaking. I am a little different because I am in writing education and literacy education. So I'll start by speaking directly to that piece. It's something I think about so much. Writing is hard and literacy is hard because there is so much that doesn't necessarily contribute to making it inherently accessible. Just thinking about the literacy rates in our city specifically, right? I think, you have to think about, positionality and all of that. But, starting with just writing in the classroom, there's not enough effective and inclusive assessments that exist. I'll just say that off the back. I think I've seen so many, I've, tried to create so many, but a lot of that is just, we're not necessarily tailoring a lot of writing professional development that is also inclusive and effective for educators, but also not enough space for writing just for writing's sake. Specifically in the classroom. I think that's why after school programs are just such valid, but also, you have to think about what time, what space, where does it exist? It's not always accessible, for parents to drop their young people off or for young people to get there. I think also just honing in on not validating what writing young people are already doing. Young people are writing and creating all the time, and sometimes it's just not necessarily validated because of what it looks like or feels like, or, doesn't take into consideration a lot of those pieces. I've also just seen so much outdated source material and resources used in literacy and writing spaces, a value of teaching writers, non-living writers, focusing specifically on the English language and stories of just one culture, but, ways to get to accessibility. Of course, live on the other side of that, updating source materials with BIPOC artists who speak different languages, writers who live with different abilities, who are neurodivergent, who live in, the proximity of your city, ways that will excite young people to get there and validate, they look like me, speak like me, live where I live, right? And also writers of different ages. I think that this is something, former organization that I love dearly and used to work with at 826 Chicago. All of the writing resulted in publications, all of the programming rather resulted in student publications. So we were, we were using writing from first graders and second graders and fifth graders and ninth graders to be able to teach different skill sets. Which I think is just a beautiful way to elevate, who says that you have to teach an exemplar of writing by someone who is 3 times, a young person's age. And so, but I think a lot of the time there's a missed opportunity to discuss writing and break down meaning and make connections in discussions to what is happening today. Writing for the sake of a score is one thing, but writing to connect to social emotional learning skills is another. And I think kind of inclusively of all arts disciplines too, which has already been elevated by a few other folks here, is just positionality. How do we position young people as artists? You know, when a young person walks into a learning space, I position them as an artist. I call them an author. I call them an artist. And I think that that does a lot for confidence and encouraging participation and well-being. I think a lot of inaccessibility too is like, oh, my young people don't want to participate, or they're not participating for a reason, right? They might not feel safe. They might not feel well equipped. And so there's always a hierarchy of learning, you know, an educator and students. And I think that if we decenter that and everyone sees themselves as an artist, it does a lot for the culture of accessibility and the mindset. So yeah, just wanted to elevate that.
Thank you, Asia, for those insights. There are so many considerations, and like we're just even focusing on writing here. And then when you start to broaden it to all of the disciplines, and you said something at the top about sometimes folks thinking about the arts as being inherently accessible or inclusive. And you know, that I think that sometimes is a common misconception that can end up being a little bit of a barrier, a hindrance in making those and that progress in a particular discipline area. But I do believe that arts education practitioners and teaching artists are out there doing their due diligence and really trying to figure out how to create communities of care. They're kind of at the forefront of that work. But yeah, that being said, sometimes we fall a little short, or things are evolving and we're not quite there. But I love those reflections. So thank you. Asia's Institute, once again, will be focused on making writing accessible, intentional, and also interesting for students, and putting the student at the center and the community of writers at the center as well. Robbie, I'd also like to get your thoughts on this topic, as your practice also centers accessibility quite a bit, especially as it relates to dance and movement.
Yeah, so kind of going back to the point of making accessibility the foundation, one of the things that we try to do in some of the disability dance communities here in Chicago is when we're prepping for a workshop or a session, a class, anything like that, is we'll try to make access needs, we'll try to meet them before they're even asked about. Like at the last couple of workshops we had, we got CART or live captioning. We had interpreters who did sign language. And at the last few, one of the things that we've been, it's a fairly new kind of field for audio description, is having audio describers describe dance. In the larger Chicagoland area, there's only really like one audio describer who is like comfortable doing this. It's a friend of mine, Victor Cole. So we try to have him at events, and we're encouraging students to kind of start to venture into this field, to be more comfortable. We're trying to provide them with the tools there. For example, Columbia College had their hip hop festival called the B Series. One of the featured artists for it was Bill Shannon. He's a disabled dancer, dances on crutches. And one of the sessions that we had there was Victor Cole giving a session on how to audio describe dance, so that we can include blind or visually impaired attendees as well as dancers, and exploring that field. So it's all growing. So yeah, the the short version of all that is, we first try to make sure that access is available when we start. And then from there, as people come in, we try to give them the permission to not necessarily have to follow our movements exactly when we're teaching a movement or a phrase. We will ask them to move in a way that's comfortable to them. The technical term that gets thrown around is transposition, transposing a movement from what one dancer does into another. But we encourage students to explore the movements. We're like, okay, we have a dancer in a manual wheelchair, power wheelchair, one on crutches. How do we invoke the same feeling or the same feeling or the same rhythm of a movement in all of these different body types? And one of the things we encourage the students to do is not just figure it out, but also to show it to each other, so that they can see what it looks like from one person to another, like giving them the time to see, digest, explore, and sometimes even create new movements based off of all of that.
Wow, that is so interesting. I'm almost thinking that there's even opportunity there across discipline for maybe how a singer, for instance, or a musician might interpret the actual physical movements, or how a writer might interpret those movements. So I'm just hearing what you're saying about these new kind of innovations and how they could even be kind of go through this vehicle of art as well. So that's really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to shift gears a little bit now. For this next question, we're going to have Bradley start us off. And the question that we have for you, Bradley, how accepting and open are we of our teaching artists showing up in ways they define as their full selves? And how does this produce a ripple effect that encourages students to be who they are?
Thanks for that. So this is Bradley. A little bit of background on the particular arts education work that I do. The company that I work for, we focus our attention on opportunity. We focus our attention on students that would normally not have access to the arts, which is primarily here in the city of Chicago on the south and west sides. Our teaching artists are a group of individuals that are not all studio trained, but a group of individuals that have realized that dance saved their life in some kind of way. So I think if we allow teachers to tell their stories, to show up in ways that they, again, like you said, Courtney, where they feel is them being their full selves, it then it encourages students to be just as open. Where I've had teaching artists that have suffered from housing insecurity. I also have students that have suffered from housing insecurity, and what a special place those students will feel, have such a sense of belonging to know that I'm not the only one that has ever experienced this before. And there's this concept and idea that students don't learn from people that they don't like. So if you can find this relatability, if you can find this level of belonging, this level of comfortability, it allows you to reach them on a much deeper level than you probably would have ever imagined. And even if they don't turn out to be the next dancer or the next singer or the next awesome author, they've learned some extremely good life skills just based on the community that they've been encouraged to gain, just because I showed up and I told my story and I was honest about who I was.
Yes, I love that. Just thinking about the ripple effect is really interesting to me. And that can even start in different places. So thinking about how our, program managers showing up as them full selves to create the space then for teaching artists to show up as themselves, and then students to show up as themselves. So really just like normalizing showing up as your full self, however you interpret that.
And even classroom teachers, not just in the arts, but
Yeah.
how do classroom teachers show up in the day? How does your principal show up in the day? This also gives them this idea of what successful means. So if I'm successful, that means I have to look this way, I have to wear a suit, or I have to wear this. Maybe
Right.
They don't have access to those things, but that doesn't make what, your inherent worth any less.
Yeah. And even that word professional, sometimes I know that we used to call our programs professional learning, and we had to reevaluate that, because that carries some meaning for some people. And, you might think, oh, what does that mean for me? Like, do I belong in that space? Can I show up as my full self in that space? Can I wear my hair the way I like to in that space? And so that is something that we've thought a lot about as well. Okay, thank you, Bradley. Maya, who is a consultant on our P&L team, also has a teaching artist practice. Maya, it will be really great to get your insights on this topic as well. What have been some of your experiences as it relates to feeling like you can show up as your full self in a classroom or in an arts organization setting?
Yeah, echoing really the sentiment and the meaning of what has already been shared, I truly believe that you can't encourage what you're not able to practice yourself. And so when teaching artists aren't able to actually practice who they are and show up as they are and be able to engage in their own identity, it's hard for them to facilitate a space for that for students. And I also think it's hard for them to teach students to value that about themselves, that they have that's unique, or that they have that is because of this experience or that experience. And it just, you can't do what you don't have, in a way. You know, and you really have to be able to support for other people what you have the experience of engaging in. And I think that also it teaches us, if we're working even as adults still, you know, to include our identities, to understand what our identities are, it teaches students that, one, you are going to be influenced by the life that you live. And so you have to understand your identity now, but you have to be familiar with it now, because it's something that you're going to need as a muscle to flex forever, you know? And so it really also, I think it's important to plant those seeds, the seeds being, you know, introspection, you know, discovery, investigation, those kinds of things. And then, you know, we talk about how young folks are so imaginative and they haven't yet lost play, or they haven't yet lost all these things. And it's like, you know, we all, I think a lot of those things, you know, it's like creating environments where students, young folks can keep this, because we want to model that it's important to have it throughout our whole lives. And then we can't model that unless we show them, like, we still have it now. You know, we're older, but we still have this. We're older, but we're still valuing this.
Yeah, definitely. Wow, thank you so much. And also valuing the evolution of what that looks like maybe throughout the years, and knowing when those shifts are happening and embracing those shifts. Yeah, so much. Thank you, thank you. I'm going to pass it back to Ariel now. Next question.
Thanks, Courtney. This is Ariel. So, Emily, I think this is a really important question, the way that I'm phrasing it, because you work directly with students, but also with other teaching artists, as someone who is at several different levels in your own organization. So how do we give teaching artists and students the tools to execute their artistic vision?
Yeah, to just elaborate a little bit more on what Ariel's saying about my work, I run a very small company, and I call myself the executive director and lead teaching artist, because currently I'm involved in all of our projects, but our projects tend to engage between 2 and 6 teaching artists. We never have fewer than 2 teaching artists in the classroom. And part of the reason we never have fewer than 2 is that one of the things I've learned is that teaching artists need each other to stay mentally healthy in the classroom. They need to be able to walk out and be like, that happened, right? And have the other person be like, yeah, that happened. Okay, and we'll figure out how to deal with it together. Because a lot of wild things happen when you're a teaching artist. People behave in strange ways around the arts based on experiences we know nothing about. And so the other fun piece of this is that when I first became an administrator at the Beverly Arts Center back in like 2003 or 6, it was one of those numbers. It is divisible by 3. I became head of a department that included visual arts in outreach. And I did not have a ton of experience in administrating visual arts. My background is in theater, musical theater, improv. So I have a lot of background in crafting arts, costuming, 3-dimensional arts. But in terms of traditional visual art classroom work, I did not know how to give an appropriate budget. And again, I had to have teaching artists be like, that's not enough. Sorry, I can't work with this. Or, you know, had to have, and this is again a thing I should have known. I've worked with drawing paper before, but I had to be reminded, like, printer paper and drawing paper are not the same resource. There's a big difference in what I can do with an eraser, quality drawing paper versus printing paper. So a big part of my job was to like learn how much budget they actually needed and figure out a process that allowed them to both get the materials they needed, but left them wiggle room for when they were like, oh, actually, we decided we want to do this other project that needs this special tool. because I think the other hazard that teaching artists run into is that they're expected to make a plan at the beginning, and we all know that that is actually not when we have the information we need to know what the students need. So if I have to make my budget before I ever meet the students, I might get 4 weeks in and be like, oh, they can't actually use this resource at all. They're not ready. But on the other hand, they have a surprising facility with this other resource and they love it, and we can really dig into that. So planning for flexibility as well as enough money it was a big part of my learning process. But even on top of that, learning how to teach visual artists some of the same classroom management skills that my performing artists use, knowing that they're coming from different places as artists. You know, the getting to know you games that are super fun for theater kids might not be fun for visual arts teachers. They might not be comfortable leading an activity like that. So that's where some of this translation that we're talking about can come into play, is what does this look like when I take this learning this SEL skill from theater to learning this SEL skill in a visual arts class. And again, my teaching artists has had to, my visual teaching artists have had to help me a lot with understanding how that translation can work. I'm still learning a lot about that. But what it comes down to is making sure that there's at least 2 people who can build a team together. Make sure there's a way to communicate that where both people feel supported. You know, if somebody has to call me and be like, look, I can't handle the class because XYZ, they have a partner who's like, for real though, like, this is not a minor problem. This is wild and we don't expect it. Or they have a partner who could be like, you know what? I got this. I've run into this before. So I'm going to handle this particular case while you focus on leading this lesson plan today. And that's been, I mean, since I'm in the classroom myself, that's been really valuable for me as a teaching artist. At my current school, where I'm very lucky to see the students on a daily basis, we have a team of 6 teaching artists who can interchangeably be in and out of the classrooms. And again, there's never less than 2 of us there. So the students know we all talk to each other. They know that what one teacher does with them is going to connect to what the other teacher does. And it makes things like practical things like finding subs easier. Not easy, but easier. And then the subs then are students. Students know these people. But it took a long time to visualize a structure like this. And I'm still in the process of learning how to properly fund a structure like this in a way that is sustainable for the teaching artist and a business model of a small business. But I have confidence that we can get there. And I think the work Ingenuity's done has really provided a platform for schools to understand why I'm showing up with 3 people instead of 1.
Thank you so much for that, Emily. This is Ariel. And also, I mean, Emily is such a great Ingenuity cheerleader. I love it. So Cleo, I really would love for you to also weigh in on this, especially as someone who's teaching in Chicago public schools and being able to give those tools in a music context.
Yeah, this is Cleo. I very much relate to so much of what Emily said. First of all, with the budget, not only knowing how to sort of allocate a budget, but just, yeah, having a team or just people to help advise, like how much do I need for what? Like, for example, right now we're already planning for the spring musical at Bell School, and it's me doing the music and a substitute doing the acting direction and a 3rd grade teacher producing, and I'm already so excited because I have no idea how on earth I would have handled all that by myself. So definitely a good team, understanding the sort of logistics behind the scenes stuff. As far as helping students find their own artistic vision, I think for me, it really includes giving students opportunities for leadership in the music making process, and also giving them, including their voices in designing concert programs and in developing productions. My favorite thing recently has had different students lead vocal warm-ups in choir. To be honest, the first time this happened, the main reason I asked was I was just very, very tired. I was like, some student who's been in choir with me before, like, can someone please just get us started? And once I saw like how excited they were and how several students just lit up to be the ones to like pick a new warm-up or come up with a new one on the spot, it was like really, really inspiring. I was like, okay, now I'm going to do this all the time. Yeah, they started like turning tongue twisters they knew into warm-ups, and I would help them. I would sit at the piano and like, oh, okay, let's find a new melody for how much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood. It's our newest one. I'm very excited about. But so things like that, opportunities to lead, opportunities to practice teaching. And yeah, with concert programs, it's huge because like with my middle school choir, I find, yeah, students as they get older, I mean, they start to find their own music tastes. They know kind of what excites them. So first or second rehearsal, I was like, okay, what do you guys want to sing? Took some notes, and next week I handed them a Wicked medley, and these students are so excited. It's awesome. Getting ideas about, oh, like, so can we split this into like a couple different solos? And what if we, yeah, so giving them music they're excited about, hearing their suggestions and allowing them to, yeah, do some of the artistic decisions really gets them very, very excited. And it's a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for that, Cleo. I really appreciate it. I think this has been such a wonderfully robust conversation, and I love hearing from all of you about the ways that you are approaching all of these different things in the spaces that you're working in. And that's one of the reasons why this cohort is so just wonderful, and the ways that we're able to also riff off of each other and think about things from the standpoint of, you know, I'm a musician, what does that look like for someone who's a dancer? And the really unique opportunities that we have when we are able to interact cross discipline and have an understanding of what are the ways that I've been trained to think as a musician or as a dancer. And all those things also depend on what kind of training I have. Did I train myself to be a musician? Did I go to YouTube University? Or, you know, did I go to a conservatory? And even those things within a discipline can be so helpful to be able to think in a different way. And I think that's maybe the most important thing about inclusion and about identity and about disability culture, because as artists, we can end up just being in our lane, unless our lane is like Emily's lane and it's all the lanes. But we can be, you know, just in our lane and be thinking only in that lane. And once we start to expand that and think about what an experience would look like from the standpoint of a different discipline, now all of a sudden it's easier to think about something from the standpoint of a different ability, the standpoint of I'm this tall and this person is in a wheelchair, so they're this tall. It becomes easier to be empathetic once we start doing that. So I'm very, very excited that all of you will get to share with our collective community of Chicago, and, you know, maybe some other people from all around the world on Eventbrite. But from the perspective of being in Chicago, the ways that you are thinking about this with your colleagues. And I should also say it's really important, and I won't speak for the residents, but my experience has been with our last cohort that these things are, we are intentionally trying to change the narrative about what learning looks like. And so it's not so much the sage on stage type of thing that we're doing. All of these things are conversations between all of us who are doing this work on a regular basis. And we are discovering and hopefully leaning into the fact that we are all learners all the time. So even though I'm the person with the little green thing around my face because I'm the one speaking right now, that doesn't make me more important than Asia or more important than Cleo, because I've already learned so many things from this cohort. So before we move on to some of your questions, which if you haven't been submitting any questions, I definitely encourage you to do that. But before we do that, I wonder if there's anything that any of our residents would like to pull on the thread of, or talk about what that's going to look like in your practice or in your institute. And I'll say, I know it's been like maybe a while since Asia has said anything, so I don't know if some of the things that other people have said have sparked some wonderful things in your brain. Maybe the same with Robbie.
This is Robbie. Yeah, I apologize. I lost a little bit of the thread. But I did want to say one of the things that's been really like, eventually I want to like keep collaborating with everyone in the cohort, because it's great to be able to learn from you all, being like a really new teaching artist. I got a chance to touch base with Cleo, and we talked a little bit about like where their practice, their presentation has all come from. And going back to one of the earlier points about teaching artists being their whole selves, one of the things I thought was really interesting is Cleo's like presentation and presentation work started as a journal for them, like about what they've gone through, what they've experienced. And at least going to my students at ICRE here in Illinois, coming as your most authentic self like has been incredibly effective, and I really, really enjoy that. So I just wanted to just put that up as a little bright point of being able to talk with someone else in the cohort that ultimately I'd love to talk to everybody else. We're still navigating this virtual world, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the shout out. I just want to add to that because yeah, I think especially I noticed with the younger students I teach, like particularly K-2, I think showing up authentically is almost like teaching by existing. Like by simply entering the spaces yourself, you are teaching so many people about so many things. And I remember maybe Robbie and I, we were talking about this too, but I get so many like genuinely honest questions from very little kids that would probably annoy me from an adult. Like, why are you wearing a dress? And I just say, because this is how I like to dress. Or like, are you a boy or a girl? And I say, I'm somewhere in the middle. We'll talk about it later. But yeah, so it's the simple questions, but it's also, yeah, just showing up teaches a lot of people.
Oh, that also, sorry, this is Robbie. That also brought up a fun point that I've been playing with in sessions with students, of showing them that it's okay to fail. So sometimes in class, I'll just kind of like be showing a movement like a wheelie or something, and then I'll fall over, and then just kind of laugh about it, get back up, and encouraging them to that when we show them a new movement, it's like, hey, if you mess it up, it's okay. It's like, laugh about it, like intentionally laugh. It's okay. We're exploring, and none of us really have all the answers, so it's okay to just bumble around and stumble through. Sorry, tangent done.
I think that this is Ariel. I think that is a really wonderful sentiment as well, and something that I also try to do with my college students that I teach. When I show up to class at 8 a.m. and like I can't get the projector to work, or you know, I haven't graded their assignments yet, or things like that. I think that when we show humanity to other people, no matter their age, then it gives them the permission to be human as well. And I think that humans are naturally empathetic, but there are so many ways as we get older that we divide ourselves or put ourselves in a particular kind of box. And I wonder, Bradley, if you can talk a little bit more about some of the experiences that you've had with teaching artists that you work with and how that has changed the way that they work with their students.
Sure. I think for all of us, meaning human beings in general, we always long for this sense of belonging, this sense of someone else knows or has experienced what I experienced. And like I mentioned before, most of our teaching artists are not studio trained teaching artists. Have they studied dance? Absolutely. But they're coming back to this work from a place of, when I was in a low place, when I was in a hurting place, when I was in an evolving place, dance saved my life. And I think showing that to the students, kind of back to what Cleo said, just existing, but also knowing what that means. Every day is not a good morning, friends kind of day. And that's okay, because I have students where it's like, Ms. B, today is just, it's not the day for me. and being okay with that and allowing the space for those things to happen. Everybody has a day, everybody's got a feeling. And sometimes it rubs off, particularly when you're working with kindergartners and first and second graders. If I got a headache, now everybody in the class got a headache. So, and just kind of understanding and facilitating, like, again, just showing up. There's so much learning in just being and having honest conversations. Children understand more than we'd like to give them credit for. Particularly now with social media and TikTok and all the things, they really understand a lot. And sometimes I think students just look at me like, or when you say things like, oh, we'll talk about it later. And they're like, well, girl, I already know. I just, wanted to hear what you were gonna say. And again, just having that openness and conversation, again, it fosters so much belonging, so much identity, so much community, and the students love it. And they'll see you in 5 years when they're in high school and tell you something that'll just really light you up, because you don't recognize how important the things you say, the things you do, just existing means to them.
Asia, as someone who definitely had encountered and fell in love with writing as a young person, are there any experiences that you had specifically that you think were affirming to your identity or kept you being in love with writing?
Yeah, absolutely. This is Asia speaking. I love hearing these stories just about just truly just showing up and being yourself. I think what kept me was writing was a space where I couldn't be wrong, right? And so I know that there is, the ways that we've been taught in the classroom, but creative writing is the space in which I grew up and I fell in love, and I was able to take these creative mechanisms and make it applicable to academic writing. But, and I also lived in a space of performance. And so I work at the organization in which kind of held me. So Young Chicago Authors puts on the largest poetry festival in the world, and I participated, and then I became a coach. But when I was participating, we always, made it to the final stage, my team and I, but we never won. And I think I didn't care about the winning. I think it was more so, this is a space where oral tradition is really living and where communicating so much of our stories, our narratives, this information, healing, right, existing, the spaces of transformation. And I just was in love with that. And I was like, I want to do more of this. I want to do more of this. And it wasn't about the winning. And even with coaching, it was never about the winning. I just saw how young people really took to, this beautiful space of communication. We might not be able to do this or in our homes or in our communities or even with one another, but the bravery of getting on a stage and doing something, we're really witnessing a huge moment in young people's lives. And, there are so many young people I've worked with who always come to me, years later, and I hear these stories all the time. That was the best time of my life. And to be able to say, getting on a stage and communicating something funny or powerful or brave is one of the biggest moments in a young person's life. And I think that that's so important. And even the biggest the thing is, do people want to be an author? Do people want to continue to perform for the rest of their lives? It's these transferable skills go into so many different professional spheres. And I think that we don't really take to, yes, arts education, you don't always have to cultivate the next so-and-so, but know and consider how this is truly transforming lives. And, you're witnessing how young people are growing into the versions of themselves that, they never considered or never knew that they could. And I think that that was something for me that I definitely synthesized way later in my existence. But yeah.
Thank you so much. I am really just loving how open and vulnerable and brilliant all of you are. And we do want to make sure that we have some time for all of the people in our attendee audience to interact with you a little bit today. But before we do that, we're going to do a couple other little things. So I'm going to hand it off to Courtney.
Thank you, Ariel. So many incredible insights and takeaways in this conversation. Thank you so much to all of the panelists. Thank you, Ariel. Thank you, Maya. This has really been an incredible conversation. Before we hear more questions from you all, we'd love to get your participation in this next portion. So everyone, just take a moment to think of something that really resonated with you during this conversation. Type it into the chat. In just a minute, we'll make that available for you. And then when I give you the go ahead, we'll all press the enter button and we'll create a cascade of responses into the chat. So just give me one moment here to make that available for you all and take some time to think here. Okay, and then in the chat drop down, select everyone so that everyone will be able to see what you enter into the chat, but don't press enter just yet. I'll let you know when.
Court, are you the one doing that? Am I supposed to do it?
Yes, it should be available now.
Excellent.
So take another moment. And then in 1, 2, 3.
So some of the things that people have said, going from TA to admin struggles, showing young artists that it's okay to fail. LaDonna says, I wholeheartedly agree that showing up as one's authentic self is powerful in and of itself. Brady says, language may seem small, but it makes a huge difference. Karen says, it's okay to find yourself. Grace says, the ripple effect of showing up as our whole selves. That seems to be something that's really resonated with a lot of people. Robbie says, when we show humanity, we give people the permission to be human. Christine says, being human and how being professional can be non-inclusive. Billy says, diversity in method with mood. Channing says, I've enjoyed that all of your practices seem to center empathy, compassion, and meeting students where they are at each day. Amanda said they didn't hear the question. Amanda, you corrected me up. We just want to know what resonated with you, Amanda, so I'll give you another chance. Terrence says, I love how Bradley talked about the importance of showing up authentically with your students and allowing them to see you human. Oh, by the way, what's her social media handle? We'll get into that in a moment. Katya says, Emily's comment, the first step of inclusion is the student's own perception of what they can and can't do, then helping them find their way to do it. That's so amazing. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so I can see in the Q&A that right now we have only 3 questions, and I'm sure that you all have many more things that you might want to ask someone specific on the panel or to have everyone answer. And thank you, Amanda. What resonated with me was that TAs are human, thinking more about how we can support them in those real ways that can make it more possible for them to show up authentically. Thank you so much for that, Amanda. I appreciate you. So we don't have to go all the way until 3 o'clock, but this is a wonderful time for you to ask some questions. So I'm going to hand it off to Maya.
So please, even as we start reading these questions, don't hesitate to submit any if you have some. But I'll start with a question from Terrence Robinson, which is, and I offer this up to the panel, whoever would like to grab it, or whoever's, more than one person can answer. How do we incorporate the diversity of African diaspora culture into arts education, curriculums, with students in the city? In terms of African-American, African with a K, biracial, and Afro-Latinx experiences.
This is Robbie. I guess I can kick us off for this one. So at least for what I've tried to do is, so before my injury, before my disability, I was a Argentine tango dancer. So one of the things that we would talk about in order to create a bit of a connection is to talk about the African roots of tango, where it's come from, where the music comes from, the freed slaves from the areas in South America where it originated. So we'd use that to kind of create a foundation. So talking about the history of where these things come from. And then even because I identify as Afro-Latine, my father's Black, my mother's Mexican. And we talk about the African roots of a lot of the music that we have. So I try to, when talking about those experiences with students, trying to give them that foundation of, this is where this comes from, this is the history. We can honor it by knowing and by putting forth artists in the community of these communities.
Definitely agree with that, Robbie. This is Bradley. One of the first dances that my executive director taught me to teach in the classroom was the South African gumboot dance, which chronicles, the Soweto riots in South Africa and this whole thing. So that is one thing that I think is important, is to be able to tie this historic fact to something present, because we know the history continues to repeat itself. There's something that these students have experienced that you can connect back to something that has already happened. We also, the company that I work with, we make it important that we take our students to see other styles of dance. If we think about dance, how this first you notice you have like girls in buns and tutus and all of those things, and that's not the full reality of what dance is. So we make it a point to make sure we are exposing our students to other dancers of color, whether that's, deeply rooted, whether that's, Chicago Multicultural Dance Center, whether that's Najwa Dance Corps, whether that's Montu, but it all looks different. Everybody does something different. They're all Black people, but they all do something different because they come from different parts of the diaspora. And just being very vocal about that, again, kids know a lot more than we give them credit for. And I think if we're just willing to have those conversations, which some people think is taboo to bring those things up, but I think just kind of dismantling the barriers and having those honest conversations, Black people came from a lot of different places by way of this. This is what happened. This is how, you know, I look like this, but you might look like this, or someone else looks this way. And using people that they know as examples.
The next question we have is from Grace Grindell, and I offer this also up to the panel. When you're visiting a school very briefly for a program or hosting several schools for just one day, how can you bring in a practice of inclusivity and disability awareness when there is not a ton of familiarity with the community and time is limited together?
This is Robbie. I guess I can kick us. Oh, Bradley. Okay.
I'll come after you.
All right. So one of the things that was a surprising and healthy practice going from the able-bodied larger dance community to disability and inclusive dance communities was that we open a lot of sessions, workshops, classes with first by acknowledging that people all that they know their bodies, they know how they feel better than we possibly could because we aren't them. And inviting them to be vocal about it has been a really successful way to get students more comfortable to talk about it. And I try to share like my most honest mood with like how I'm feeling that day with them as well, to be like, yeah, you know what, I'm feeling kind of cruddy today. It's okay to talk about that. If your energy is a little bit lower, we'll find something a little easier to go through. And just inviting that dialogue has been really helpful in just pulling that out of the students. Yeah.
I think if you are going somewhere for a very short amount of time or just doing a one-day development, it's funny, my mom used to always tell me when I would do things, you got to start off with a joke. So I think something that's relatable, something that's going to get their attention, whether you wear a cool hat or whether you wear something in the school colors or something that's going to get them to start to ask you questions, I think will open up this sense of, well, I can talk to her, or I can relate, or maybe this is going to be fun. And to Robbie's point, be honest about how you're feeling today, whether it's like, hey guys, I'm super excited to be here with you, or it's like, hey guys, this is my 5th school of the day. You work with me, I'm gonna work with you, and we kind of figure out how it is. So I think it still goes back to showing up as your full self and being completely honest. Students really, they understand energy, they feel it, they can know if somebody's coming in and they're not really, you know, completely sold on what's happening. So come in, ask them questions, you know, start off with the game. I think keeping it fun and keeping it light helps to draw them in, and then kind of get down to whatever real business that you are looking to do in that session.
Some of the practical tools I've used for things like this are advanced surveys, the teacher or the students, depending on what you think will work, just get to know whatever it is you need to know, something about their community, their interests. Walking in the door with something that they can succeed at very quickly in the first 5 minutes or so, a very simple activity that they can see they can do so that they understand this is within their abilities. And being very clear from the beginning of the workshop with the students of what's the end goal today? Where are we trying to end up? Why do I want you to know when you leave that you don't know now, so that they see there might be value in it to them? And how can you participate in this workshop? Do we have levels of options for participation? If you're not a get on stage person, then here are audience expectations and how you will participate as an audience member. If you are a writer but not a performer, here's a way you can work with your group to give them words to say on stage. So I think there's a lot of trepidation, especially in a one-day workshop for kids who are not comfortable being artists or performers, that like they're going to get judged by this stranger for doing art bad. And so they're not going to try till they trust you. So along with keeping it light, keeping it fun, showing them very quickly, they can do this. And if they don't want to do this, there's ways to successfully not do it and still do it.
Yeah,
Thanks, Emily. I'm actually going to answer this question too. I know I'm not technically a panelist. but this is Ariel speaking. So I think there are a couple of things that are, again, some practical tools that you can use in a situation like this. The first one is incorporate accessibility into everything that you do. So that way you don't have to say, well, no one told me that a wheelchair user was going to be in this workshop, or no one told me there would be a deaf person here, or no one told me that there would be someone with ADHD. And of course, we can't plan for every single eventuality, but if you are already thinking about those things and including those people when you're planning your event, when you're planning your workshop, then you don't have to do it on the fly or have someone feel left out because they weren't thought of. And I think the other thing that we can really do is, when we're planning these things, usually we aren't finding out that we're going to go to a place like the day that we're going to go there, right? So even though you may have your program or whatever is involving you in the school might be for a brief time, that doesn't mean that you can't talk to the principal of that school or even visit the school by yourself to just see what the culture of the school is like, or to talk to some students or talk to a classroom teacher, talk to whomever, talk to your arts liaison at that school, right? Because they're probably the person that got you into the school in the first place. So we have a lot of resources before we get to a place to understand what that community is like. And I think that can be very helpful and robust. And it also really makes everyone involved feel more comfortable and feel like their contribution to whatever is happening matters.
And Asia, were you gonna answer that also?
Thank you, Maya. Yes, I was. This is Asia speaking. Some of those pieces around doing your own planning and having the onus also fall on yourself as well, right? To get an understanding of the school, get an understanding of the community. We can't always assume that, the classroom teacher or principal will be available or will complete that form. I mean, the hope is, right? And so just being able to have your own bag of tricks, pre and during, whenever I come into a school or community, I always have like a huge bag of tricks. I also, make sure that I have, plan A and plan B just in case, right? Because you don't know what is going to happen. You don't know the mood of your young people. You don't know the needs. You have to be open to change and flexibility. If I have an hour, I'm planning for 45 minutes because I need that buffer time, right? But I think what's really, really vital is being able to set the tone. Coming up with a community of agreements with the folks in that space. I think that a lot of folks, don't necessarily always take advantage of that. And I think what's beautiful about coming up with a community of agreements together is opening the floor and coming up, with your own. Here, you can start with yourself. I'm hoping that we are XYZ, or that this is what we can accomplish today. And it just allows young people to also be able to share out their needs, for that day, or, things that are extremely important. And so coming up with that together and making sure that you abide by it, but also make it open to revision during the day.
Our next question is from Terrence Robinson, and I offer this up to the panel. When and where did you fall in love with the arts?
I'll start with this one because the reason I work in the arts is because I found my community in the arts. I think that's true for many, many, many people. And it's one of the great joys of working with youth is seeing students find a connection through the arts that they couldn't find anywhere else. So I fell in love with the arts when I was very young. Have memories of watching my cousin in a production of Godspell and just being absolutely gobsmacked by the impact that the show could have on the audience and on the performers, because I knew my cousin and how the participation in the show was affecting him. But I think for me, one of the best thing about the arts is the summer camp effect. The feeling that you've gone someplace else where you can be someone else. You can start over because we're artists, so we can have a stage persona or a pen name or an artist's name. So we can invent a version of ourselves that we wish we could put maybe into the real world, but we need to test drive first. And so watching students kind of test drive the next evolution of their personality, I think is, for me, what it's all about. Watching them step into a space where they can make a new connection and become who they really want to be next.
Yeah, for me, I think it was for several summers there was a theater camp at Indian Boundary Park in West Riders Park. I grew up like a few blocks away. And yeah, so much of what Emily just said resonates because yeah, I think that was the beginning of my realizing, oh, like participating in the arts, you can like create, you can become someone new, you can, I don't know, it was just kind of where my imagination could fly.
I did not have an instant falling in love with the arts, so to speak. I started dancing like at my church, and I was fine with that, and it was enough for me. And my older brother got invited. Someone told my mom about an all boys dance class, and he went and he really enjoyed it and he loved it. And my mom's like, "Well, I'm going to put you in." And I'm like, "No, I just want to stay at church and learn from the lady at the church. I don't want to go." So I started dancing at Billcrest School of Performing Arts that was right off 119th in Halsted. And I met Derek Witters, who is currently the youth dance instructor over at Deeply Rooted. He taught me so much. And then when I was about 16, I started working at a Gallery 37 program where I met my executive director, Pierre Lockett. And that was where for the first time I wasn't my big brother's little sister. And I had my own space, and I kind of was able to come out of my shell and actually be who I wanted to be and realize I actually do like dance. I just didn't like being his little sister. I wanted to have my own identity. So it was at that point, I was probably about 15 or 16, where I really fell in love with the art form. And it was at that point that it kind of saved me and gave me a sense of identity and belonging.
This is Robbie. I'll talk a little bit about it too. Funny enough, it started teenage years like everyone else, where this is back in like the late 90s, early 2000s. I would hear like music that I would like, and I would hear lyrics that I liked, but there wasn't a good way to get those lyrics at the time. So what I would do is I'd listen to a song like 20, 30, 40 times, and I'd write down all of the lyrics. Because those would resonate with me. And then I started writing my own stuff. And I was like, oh, this is a lot of fun. Where can this take me? And I started plugging more into the different arts classes at school, until finally my English teacher was like, Robbie, you should go do theater. Have you ever thought about trying it? I was like, okay, cool. Let me go try it. Fell in love with Shakespeare, and then went from there to musical theater, and then from musical theater to dance. And so when I came out here for college in Chicago, continued in improv for a little bit while I was in college, and then started dancing. And this goes back to something Asia had mentioned earlier about how in that expression, I was able to give voice to things that I wouldn't normally be able to give voice to. Like I wouldn't be able to talk about certain emotions, mostly weird societal pressures, being a cis man, all these weird things. But in the arts, that wasn't there. Or wasn't felt there. And so eventually that led to giving the permission to just be that at all times. And so I was like, oh, cool. Well, this is a thing that I can share with students, be able to talk about and be like, no, come as your authentic self. Don't worry about what what you think this pressure is on you, what you think this expectation is on you, talk. It's okay. Yeah.
Our next question is from Karen Sarasen. I'm enjoying how the discussion resonates with the equity pedagogy or pedagogy of equity. Equity pedagogy with the approach to education in which teachers and schools develop strategies and cultivate environments that better support all students, especially those who have been disadvantaged in school and outside society. Also the need to use, to advocate for arts educational advancement as we are ready to reflect upon ourselves, behaviors, and values to support our efforts and be culturally competent. I think I'm going to guess the question in there is about a pedagogy of equity. And I would say even an interest in the difference between, you know, equity, right? And saying that everyone just needs the same thing, because there is a difference. And I'd like to know, offer this up to the panel, what you all see as the importance in offering leaving space for everyone, you know, to need different things, as opposed to approach that says this is the different thing.
I'm gonna pop this thought in here because this has been floating around in my head and in my practice lately. The thought that our student artists need to be given the same grace to abandon their work that we give ourselves as adult artists. There's a real tendency to be like, no, this is the project, you have to finish it, even if you're not happy with how it's going. And whether as an adult, if I'm in the middle of working on a piece of art and it's going poorly, I have permission to be like, you know what? No, we're not going to put any more time into something that's not bringing me value as an artist. So I've been thinking a lot about how I can build lesson plans that give students space, and not to promote my own workshop, but this is part of what we're talking about in the workshop I'll be teaching, is how to have a structure for your students' projects that gives them a space where they can say, this is not working, I want to try something different. And I think that's the end of my answer.
Great, thank you so much. And thank you, Maya, for facilitating our Q&A. Thank you, Asia, for not being mad at me because I just like steamrolled right over your answer. And thank you again to all of our panelists. I'm so excited to delve into these topics even more this year. Before we bring today's session to a close, we just wanted to put a few other partnership and learning events on your radar. So Maya is gonna throw up that slide for us so that we know what's happening there. And I'll hand it off to Court.
Ooh, yes, thank you so much, Ariel. Once again, I just want to say thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you to Ariel and Maya. Thank you to all of you out there tuning in and sharing your thoughts and questions and being on this journey with us once again. Okay, so upcoming events. So coming up on December 7th, we will be hosting a short 1-hour overview on a new suggested matches feature that we are launching on Artlook next week. So this new feature is going to elevate potential matches via notifications based on program information that's listed in your Artlook profiles. So to help jumpstart that new connection feature, we'll be hosting that overview on how to get started, how to maximize your profile and make those connections on Artlook. And additionally, you'll have time to ask some questions and connect with other teachers and arts organization partners. And then I'm going to pass it back to Ariel to shift into more Constellation stuff again.
Yes, so I've been reading all the comments about how much people have enjoyed this conversation. And of course, the point of this is to prime you all for the 2 hours that you get to spend with each resident. And your first opportunity for that is with Emily Leonard and Inclusive Practices and Tools for Executing Spectacular Student Artist Ideas. This is December 15th, 1 to 3 p.m. And you can find more about that at our events link, which I just threw in the chat. And then the next opportunity is with Asia Calcano, and Asia's topic is decentering skills and centering community, writing in the classroom. So all those wonderful things that you heard from Asia, you get 2 whole hours to experience just her energy and the way that she uses writing in the classroom and works with students and identity. That's January 26th, 1 to 3 p.m. And again, you can register to attend that one on our events page. All right, so we hope you'll be able to join us again soon for some of these upcoming events and continue with us on this learning journey. We absolutely love it. We thank you for your time and participation. Another thank you and shout out to all of our resident panelists today. And you'll be receiving by email later our exit survey. So please fill out that survey. It helps us to know if you all actually really like this type of format, if you're excited about our residents, and if we actually did what we said we came here to do. So thank you all very much.